Hi, I'm Matt with Pioneer DJ Toraiz, and I'm here at Sweetwater Sound to talk about this exciting new product. It's the third product in our Toraiz lineup called the Squid. We're calling this a sequence inspiration device, and it can be the new centerpiece to your studio or live performance setup. On the back of this unit, I have two DIN sync outputs. I've got clock in and out. I've got two CV and gate outputs. I've got two MIDI outs, and I've got MIDI in. I can record on the MIDI in as well as convert MIDI in to CV gate and USB out to the computer. So this is strictly a sequencer that you can sequence a bunch of other devices with, and it gives you tons of features to build really interesting rhythms and grooves and patterns. So the way I've got this set up is I am using the USB out to sequence a software synth. I've got a Jupiter 8 software synth set up inside my laptop. I'm using the CV gate out to control the System 1M, and then I have MIDI 1 out to our Toraiz SP16 sampler sequencer, and then I have the MIDI 2 out to our Toraiz AS1 analog mono synth. So with this unit, I have tons of hands-on control to control all my various different instruments. And what's really exciting about this is you take one user-friendly interface and apply it now to all of your instruments. Has a really fast workflow and can really just change your approach to making music. Currently I'm in track mode for the pads. If you see, I have all these different modes on the left side of the pads here. Track mode, so I can choose my different tracks. So I can control up to 16 different instruments from this unit. And the most important function for each track is which output is that track going out. So I'm utilizing the first 12 tracks to actually control 12 different sounds inside the sampler on MIDI 1, and then I'm using track 13 out MIDI 2 to the AS1. Track 14 has been set to CV gate for the System 1M, and track 15 is for the Jupiter 8 and my software synth. So when you select a track, the top knob right here selects which output you are assigning that to. If I hold Shift, I'm changing between the different outputs, and then when I release Shift, I'm changing between the different channel on that output. So it's really fast to go through and set up your different outputs. And once you set up all your outputs for your studio or your configuration, you can save that as a project file so that you can restart with that as a template moving forward. Alright, so now I'll start creating a sequence with all of this. I have track 1 selected, which is going to my kick drum sample in the SP16, and I can just switch to trigger mode here, and I'm just going to enter in a 4 on the floor pattern. Then I'm going to select track 2, which is my clap sample, and I'm going to go to trigger mode again, and I can enter in my 2 claps there, but I want my first clap to actually be a little early in time. So I'm going to put it forward 1 step, and then I'm going to use the offset function to actually nudge it backwards in time. So that way it's not a whole step earlier, but just a couple ticks early, and we'll listen to how that sounds. Next, I'm going to select my open hat track, and I'm going to switch to trigger mode again, and I'll enter in my open hats on the offbeat there. Now I'm going to use a function called interpolation. Over here on the right side, we have 3 different parameters you can interpolate: pitch, gate, and velocity. I'm going to use the velocity to have the velocity of my open hat increase over the course of these 16 steps. So the way you do that is you just hold down your first step and set the velocity where you want it to begin. And I'm going to set that to 90. And then I'll hold down the last step and set that to about 120. And if I play this back now, you'll hear the volume of the open hat increase over the course of the 16-step pattern. Now on the closed hat here, I have the closed hat set up to choke the open hat inside of the sampler. And I'm going to use something a little different here to help me get an interesting pattern with the closed hat. I'm going to use a randomization function we have on the steps. So if I hit Shift and hit the active button here, I can start getting some different random triggers. And I can hold down the active step and deactivate some steps. So I'm going to have only a 10-step pattern happening here. And let's see what this sounds like. I'm going to utilize the switchback function on that to have the pattern play forward and then backwards. And I also have turned on a function called a fixed length, which even though I have a 10-step pattern, it's going to reset every 16 steps on the one. Next, I'm going to go to track 5, which is an 808 kick drum inside of the SP16. And I have a dedicated scale knob here. So instead, I'm going to go to the scale function on the pads, and you can just turn the knob here to select which scale you want to be in, and then you can just hit Shift and turn the knob to select which key. Then you can use the up and down arrows to select the octave that you would like to be in. So I'm just going to record in a little pattern with this 808. The cool thing about the scale function is if you notice here, when I press a key that is not in the scale, it will actually filter the press into the correct scale. So what's cool about that is if I decide to choose or change scales later, it will actually filter my recording into the new scale that's selected. So next I'm going to go to track 13, which is my AS1 synth here. And I'm going to also go to scale on that and select the minor pentatonic scale that I was in. Hold Shift and select the key. So I'm going to utilize the arpeggiator function on this one. So I can just turn on the arp here, and I can hold Shift and press the ARP button to change my ARP settings. And I want to have this on an 8th note arpeggiator, so that's already set. And another interesting thing to know about all these settings that I'm setting here on the right is all of these are independent per pattern. Every track can have up to 64 patterns, and every single pattern can have its own running direction, its own speed, its own scale, its own arpeggiator, its own swing. So lots of flexibility in creating your patterns with this. So let's go ahead and listen to this bass line. So I'm just going to record in just a single, just essentially my root note on this bass line. And now I'm going to switch to the transpose function to show you that how you can now perform with that pattern. So the transpose function is a lot of fun to perform with live. Next, I'm going to go to track 14, which is going to the System 1M here on the CV gate outputs. And again, I'm going to go to scale mode, make sure that I've got my correct scale set. Make sure I'm in the correct octave. And now I'll just record something simple in with that as well. Alright, and last I'm going to go to track 15, which is going to the Jupiter 8 soft synth in the laptop here, and I'm going to show you the harmonizer function. Again, I'm going to go to scale mode, and I'm going to make sure that I have the correct scale and key selected, and I'm going to increase the amount of pages here on this pattern to 4 pages, which would be 64 steps. And I'm going to hit record. I'm going to hold the shift button when I press my first key to begin playback of the sequence in recording. Now that I've put in the root notes there, I can now add different chords on top of it by pressing the harmonizer button. So I have different chords on each one of these harmonizer buttons, and I'll demonstrate that to you. And I can record those different presses in as well. So now you can see it playing back my recording. So that's an interesting pattern really quick there. And I'm going to show you some of these speed modulations functions on the right now. And the best way for me to demonstrate that, I feel, is on just a nice snare pattern. So I'm using the track mute function to mute all of my other tracks. And I'm going to select my snare track here. I'm going to go to trigger again, and I'm just going to enter 16th note steps here. So, and I'm going to demonstrate the speed modulation over here on the left. Now again, all these settings are going to be completely independent per pattern. I'll bring in my kick drum so we can hear how that interacts with the kick drum. I can change to a different wave on that modulation. I'm going to switch to a sine wave, and I can change the amount of steps to 8 steps so that it happens twice in the 16-step pattern. You know, that's a bit extreme, so I can also dial it back a little bit. Now I'm going to reset that back to 0, and I'm going to demonstrate the swing. Now again, the swing is completely independent per pattern, so I can have swing on some patterns and swing on not on other patterns, and then I can have different levels of swing on each different pattern. And now we have this groove bend function as well, where I can bend the groove in time. And I can record those things in as well if I would like. Now you can see the automation light blinking here saying that I have recorded in some automation. If I want to clear that automation, I can just hold the copy paste buttons to delete, and then move the parameter and delete that automation. And now I want to demonstrate a couple more features with the interpolation. I'm going to set this to pitch up an octave over time. And then I'm also going to set the velocity to start at 0. And then go all the way up to 127. So now I have some swing on this pattern, and I have some interpolation on the pitch and the velocity. And then I'm going to show you a very cool feature, which is drag and dropping of the MIDI files. So I've quickly created this pattern. Now I can go to our software here, our Squid Manager, and I can just drag that MIDI file out. And now I'm going to throw that MIDI file into Ableton, and we'll take a look at it here. So here you can see the velocity and the pitch as well as the swing in that pattern. So it's pretty cool that you can actually take MIDI files that you already have, send them into the Squid, rearrange them, and send them back out, and vice versa. Okay, cool. So that's a nice overview of the Squid. This can be the centerpiece of your studio. Again, 16 tracks out to sequence up to 16 different instruments. You got all your scales, chords, step editing, a nice user-friendly, fast workflow that you can now apply to all of your hardware instruments and your software instruments. And it also excels in a live performance situation. So if you have any other questions about this, please contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. Thanks a lot.